Hello, class. You don't have to write this down. However, I just wanted to let you know what we will be learning about today. So today's agenda, we are going to be learning about scientific experiments and the variables that exist in those experiments. Particularly, we are talking about three different variables: independent variable, known as IV, dependent variable, known as DV, and control variables, known as CV. So notice that we do say independent, dependent, and control variables, but I do abbreviate it as IV, DV, CV when we're talking about it in class. So let's go ahead and begin to learn about what these variables are. Remember that when you are taking notes, we take them in the form of a T note. So remember, you're going to draw a T on your paper, and all of the questions are going to be on the left, and all of the answers are going to be on the right. You can make this section a little bit smaller because we are not going to be writing a lot over here. And then on the right-hand side, we will be placing a lot more information, so you do want to give yourself some space. Also, please note that you can give yourself even more space because when we review this information in class together, you might find that you need to add more information, and if it's all squished, you're not going to be able to do that. So let's begin. An independent variable, abbreviated as IV, is a very important variable to consider when talking about scientific experiments. It is the thing that you change in an experiment. It's the thing that you're trying to test, that you want to learn about. And there is only one independent variable per experiment. The second variable, known as the dependent variable, or DV, is what you are going to measure when you are actually doing the experiment. So what will happen is the independent variable is the thing that you're testing, and when you are doing the experiment, you are taking data that measures the dependent variable. Control variables is the third and last kind of variable in an experiment, and we abbreviate this as CV. A control variable is what you keep the same for both groups or for the entire experiment. It is what you keep constant. Sometimes control variables are also known as constants. So it is what you keep controlled, what you keep the same for the entire experiment. And therefore, the only thing that you're changing is one thing called the independent variable. Let's take an example. Please write this down and draw some rudimentary, very basic plant. So we have plant number 1, plant number 2. Scientists wonder which of these two plants will grow the most depending on how much water is given to those plants. So we know that plants need water. But now what we're toying with, what we're experimenting with, what we're wondering about is how much water is too much water, how much water is the perfect amount, or how much is too little. So remember that independent variable, the IV, is what I change. What is different about this experiment? What is the one thing that I am changing between these two plants? Go ahead and pause the video and try to figure it out, and then start the video back up when you think you have an answer. All right, so independent variable, remember, is what I change. The one thing that's different between these two plants in my particular experiment is how much water. So the amount of water is the independent variable. The dependent variable, remember, is what you are measuring. Because you are changing the amount of water that you give both of these two plants, what do you think we're measuring? If you go back to this information right here, what you are going to be measuring is how much the plant will grow. So you will be measuring the plant growth or the plant height. You could also be measuring how many leaves show up. that would determine whether or not the plant has grown. Now, with control variables, can you think of any variables, anything that you need to keep constant, that you need to control for both of these plants so that they only experience one variable that is changing, which is the water? What do you notice about these two plants at the beginning? They are the same plant. So one of the things is to use the same species of plants. And the reason why you want to use the same species of plants is because one plant might need more water than another. And this could affect what the result would be. Another thing that you need to control or might be wanting to control is the same age of plant. And the reason why you would want to have the same age of a plant is because maybe newer plants need more or less water than an older plant. And so if you're changing the age of the plant and the amount of water that the plants get, so you only want to have one independent variable for every experiment. So if you're changing the amount of water, you also need to keep the age of the plant the same. Another thing that could affect how the plant grows is the amount of soil. If you put less soil in one and more in another, this could affect how much the plants grow. And again, remember, you need to keep this the same because if you change the amount of soil, this is a different variable. This is another independent variable. So remember, you only want one independent variable for every experiment, and everything else you must keep the same. These are 3 examples, but you might be able to find other things that you need to keep the same. For example, where do you put these 2 plants? You should put both plants in the same area, experiencing the same amount of light, experiencing the same temperature. You don't want to put the plant in different areas because they might be subjected to different temperatures, different humidity, and therefore your results could be incorrect. Write this down and try to identify what you think the independent, dependent, and control variables would be for how would a person's weight change if they ate more fast food. So here we have like hamburgers and fries, and that would be person 1's diet. And then person 2's diet would not eat any of this fast food. Go ahead and pause the video, identify what the independent, dependent, and some control variables that you would want to have, and then start the video back up and see if you got them correct. All right, so for independent variable, remember an independent variable is what you change in an experiment. And in this case, we are changing the kind of food, the amount of fast food that a person eats. So your answer should be the amount of fast food in one's diet. The dependent variable is what you're going to measure. Because the person is eating a certain amount of fast food, we're trying to figure out what that person's weight is going to be because of that. Will it go up? Will it go down? We're going to measure that on a scale. Now, when doing this experiment, we need to control a lot of things. And one of the things that maybe we can control is the person that we use, right? So if you're using the same person, you would have that person eat this fast food over a course of a number of days, and then you're going to weigh that person. Then you would stop that diet and have the person begin eating a diet that does not have those foods, but the same amount of calories over the same number of days. And then you weigh that person. And you can weigh that person at the beginning and the end, or you can do multiple weighings throughout. And so that would be one way to use one person. If you were to use multiple people, then you would need to control a lot of things. One control variable would be that you could make sure that the people that you use have the similar health level, their age is about the same, ethnicity is also the same, and their gender. Because if any of these were different with the different kinds of people, then maybe that could be a reason why their weight changes or doesn't. Another thing is if you are using either the same person or lots of people, you need to make sure that when you're doing the experiment, everyone has the same level of exercise. You don't have someone who's exercising more or another one who is exercising not at all. So that way you will know whether or not the person is gaining or losing just based off of the fast food. Another thing you can control is the same amount of sleep. Sometimes if you don't get enough sleep, you could gain more weight or lose more weight. It all depends, right? And we don't know. And the only thing that we want to change is the amount of food that is eaten. That will determine whether or not the weight of the person changes. Okay, so as a recap, remember that independent variable, abbreviated IV, is what you change in an experiment. There is only one independent variable in every good experiment. The dependent variable, also known as the DV, is what I measure when I'm doing the experiment. It is the number or the data that you are taking that will help determine whether or not your independent variable affected something. Okay? The control variable, CV, is what you're keeping the same, what you're keeping constant throughout the experiment. Okay, so please have these notes ready. Review them to make sure you understand them, and let's get ready to use them in class next. Thank you.